everybody. Welcome to For the Culture podcast. I'm Christina, this is Rose, and this is Max. And we have today Dr. Anthony Guadamuz. Tell us about yourself. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Enjoy the ride over here. And I think we were talking about how our different cultures kind of blended together. So I'll just start there. I grew up in Miami and developed a lot of goals that I wanted to achieve because of, I guess, the challenges that I faced growing up. And that motivated me to do things that were first in the family, first in the community, things like that, things that were a little bit out of the box. And I can unravel that a little bit more, but basically I ended up in Texas studying integrative medicine. And then after I received my master's, I moved back, and now I just finished the doctorate, and now I'm actually shadowing some of the professionals in Miami in internal medicine, functional medicine, as it relates to my research. I already submitted it. It already got, I already presented before the scientific panel and everything. But this is just another element to incorporate into it. And so, in a nutshell, I don't know if you guys want more or.
Of course.
How did you start in medicine? Why did you choose to start the way that you did?
So, to unravel the first part a little bit more, like I was telling you guys, I grew up in a mostly black neighborhood, right, in schools and stuff like that, and I got picked on a lot too, right, or rather, I had to fight a lot out of my school zone, and it was because I didn't really speak English. I didn't start speaking, reading, writing English well until maybe the 6th grade, and so what I'm telling you by that is that my whole home education and up to that point, it was basically my parents teaching me, and what my parents knew, so I'm firstborn generation here, so my parents migrated from Nicaragua, and what my parents know, especially my mom, is herbal medicine, right, Spanish, and so growing up, before I even went into school, I knew how to read, write, do math, all in Spanish, but I didn't know it in English, right, and so I kind of, you build this tribal, I guess, affinity, right? Like you have an attachment to your culture, and so, however, at the same time, I was completely distant from my culture, so I had a longing for it. Like I was immersed in it through my mom, but then at school I was completely separated from it, and then even in our own culture, once you're, I guess, firstborn American, in certain structures, right, in certain cultural heritage, you're no longer pure, kind of, right? And so you're kind of like, oh, you don't know what it's like over there or whatever, and so that kind of motivated me to be like, no, I do. I've been over there. I'm constantly over there, and I'm obviously different. I'm not that. So kind of searching for your identity, and part of searching for my identity led me eventually to after I did the youthful games, right? In my 20s and my teens or whatever, I'm like, all right, what do I really want to do? I tapped into my childhood, and I said, I always loved when my mom was able to cook up something. I never took medication, so I was always impressed by my mom being able to cook something up that made me better. She just knew how to do stuff, and as I'm, going through my teens and my 20s, I'm reading, I'm learning, and I'm like, wow, this medicine is a problem here, and they don't, I keep seeing family members die, people getting sick from different things. I'm like, also, I grew up very rebellious, right? So I was always in my mind thinking, I'm going to be the one to bring the system down, and if I'm going to do that, I need to be prepared. I don't want to depend on an MRI or a CAT scan or another doctor, or American Scholar by Ralph Waldo Emerson. So if you're gonna be a man, you have to master all aspects. You got to be your own priest, your own doctor, your own, defender, soldier, general.
So are you against modern medicine?
No, not at all. Not in, I mean, maybe as I began that journey, I had that bias. Like I was like, nah, I don't want none of that, you know, because of what I was exposed to. But as I entered the field and actually immersed myself in the research and the literature and now clinical expertise and experience, you can't discount it. As a matter of fact, my research is actually bringing what my presentation is called is actually unifying medical worldviews. So it's not discounting what we call target-based biomedicine or specific or molecular medicine, right? Which is linear and narrow, which is what we dislike about it, because you get told that you have something based on a out-of-range hormone, but you can't identify with that as a patient. So you're like, but the rest of me feels good, and you know, and I'm not that hormone. So what are you saying, that you're gonna replace that hormone and then now I'm gonna feel better? And then they do so, and it doesn't happen. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't happen. So that lack of personalization, that lack of acknowledgement that there is is that we're more complex than just a genetic, you know, receptor site or a hormone, that that opens up for a need to introduce other perspectives, and so that kind of.
So what do you say to people that say your type of medicine, alternative type of medicine, is not as good as not as credible as a regular doctor or whatever the case is?
Sure. Well, first we have to identify or define what we mean when we say your type of medicine or alternative medicine, right? Because there's so many labels, right? So when you say my type of medicine, if I were to define for you how I practice, I would call it integrative medicine. I would call it, and actually through my research now, what I call it is that I use a CADS system, or a complex adaptive diagnostic system. And this is utilizing modern research, modern bioinformatics, as well as ancient techniques of observation and synthesizing, like gathering all the data points and coming to a conclusion about a diagnostic. I have to break that down a little bit more because I know it's too technical, but that's how I would define mine. But then you also have functional medicine, right? Under that same umbrella, under alternative medicine. You also have shamanistic medicine. You also have herbal medicine that's not tied to a specific theory, but it's more tied to a culture, right? So like you may have Tibetan medicine, you have it's like Native American herbal medicine,
or
you have
holistic.
Right. And so okay, holistic, I think that term embodies what we were talking about earlier, where it's not holistic is saying that we don't view the body as just a molecule gone wrong. We view the body as a multifactorial system.
So overall,
that's dependent on, you know, your spiritual health, your mental health, the health of the ecology in which you're in, so your social ability or your social skills, and the health status of that. All of that combined into it gets pretty complex, because having to take into, it's easy to say, I'm gonna draw your blood, I'm gonna run it through a centrifuge and measure the amount of red blood cells or white blood cells or whatever, you know, different comprehensive panel you want to run, and say, okay, based on, you know, I won't even go to what they're basing it on, because it's crazy too, but based on what we assume, these are the normal ranges, and these are the ranges that are out of alignment for you, right? So when we did that, this one is off. So based on that, this is the disease that correlates to that, more or less. It's not that direct. There is some more diagnostic tools that they use, but that's the narrow approach. That's the biological, the target-based biomedical approach, where they just consider the molecular. Well, what about the spiritual aspects, the ecological aspects that may be actually influencing that, the dietary aspects? I mean, I still have patients come to me that tell me, you know, my doctor told me that the diet has nothing to do with my disease. That's insane.
What?
Like, are they still doctors are still saying that, and I'm not talking about old doctors, like they've been in practice for, you know, decades, 40 years, and so they haven't refreshed, and so no, I'm talking about newly graduated meds that are informing their patients in this manner, right? And so because the education that they received perhaps was very narrow, it was very linear, it was solely based on molecular medicine, a biological state, right? They don't appreciate the determinant or the impact that the ecology has, right? Like phenomenological impact, meaning if it's hot outside or if it's humid outside, that's going to change the quality of your pain. But it's difficult to correlate or make that association with strong evidence, that at least based on how they determine what evidence is, right? That's a whole nother conversation. They don't take into account maybe as much emotional health, right? Spiritual, mental health, however you want to blend.
All aspects of.
Yeah, that's so when we say holistic, that's what we mean, right?
Okay.
Now, under holistic, there's several different. That's an umbrella term, and you can get a group of 10 so-called holistic practitioners or doctors, or you know, and they can have
names?
completely different degrees and use different theories and terminology.
So it's wider than we think. Basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if you ask me what kind of medicine do you use, when I say integrative medicine, I mean it in that I'm appreciating the holistic aspect. So, for example, my research was showing that there's a need to appreciate, acknowledge, and actually work within a system that takes into account the life demands of the person and how they're met by, yes, their biological potential, but also their personally acquired potential, their social environment, their ecological environment. So taking all that into account, then we say, okay, this is what may be going on with you. The fact that, you know, you're not communicating well in your community like this, or that actually this is polluted in your environment, and so this is also impacting you, and you're not eating and exercising. All of that is influencing maybe the biological, the hormone, right, or vice versa.
So when a patient goes to you, how do you treat, or what are your treatments for a typical patient?
So I use as much as possible fundamental changes in lifestyle and diet as a first means or a first option to try to influence the patient's health. Meaning, I won't even go straight into herbal medicine or acupuncture or moxibustion or cupping or functional medicine supplements or anything like that. The first thing that I want to take a look at first, diagnose and kind of assess and do a lengthy interview on is, what's your lifestyle like? What's your environment like? What's your diet like? When I gather that information, the neat thing about when you ask me, for example, what my medicine is, it's based on Taoist medicine or Yin-Yang theory-based medicine, right?
That's Chinese. Right?
That's Chinese, yeah. So they developed a whole system on how to capture all that data and then make sense of it. Because it's one thing to say, I'm a holistic practitioner and I take into account mind, body, spirit. But what do you do with all that information? Like, how do you make sense of it, right? So that theoretical system actually has developed a way to organize it and differentiate by different labels, get to a certain pattern, right? So not a state, but a pattern, like a group of symptoms and signs. Okay, this group of symptoms and signs usually means that you have this kind of pathology. Let's say maybe like a blood stasis in your lower jaw. This is terminology that we use, right? So that I use that type of diagnostic system. Based on that diagnostic system, I then apply a treatment protocol. It could be, okay, well, you have, let's say, blood stasis in your lower jaw. For women, for example, often cases, they'll have menstrual cramps, sometimes with PCOS we call it dampness, where it's the cyst.
I was just about to say that. What about cysts? That's
So-
very common in women.
Right. So there is still an element of blood stasis where there's not enough circulation breaking down the formation of these cysts. But then you also have to ask, where's the formation of the cyst coming from? Is it contraction from an emotional influence that is impacting the biology? Is it the diet? And it's likely all of those things. So when I assess that, I customize an herbal formula based on herbs that help move the blood, help nourish the blood, help detoxify maybe certain elements that are impeding in the blood flow, and let the body do its work. The whole system is based on the acknowledgement of the power of the body to heal itself. So all I'm trying to do is figure out where we've gone wrong in influencing or stopping the body from being able to express its physiological function, which is to regenerate, restore, rejuvenate, detox, and do all of the things that it needs to on its own without us telling it. I cut myself, that wound is going to heal, whether I tell it to or not.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But if I'm diseased, or if I'm under certain influences, that wound may heal poorly, or may go get an infection or whatever. And so I have to figure out what's stopping it from doing that. What does the body need from me to help it perform that function?
Doctor's been wrong too. There's miracles that been happening. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, the doctor told my older sister she was gonna make it till she was like, I think like a couple months, and she's still like living right now, breathing.
Well, good for her, good for your
Yeah.
family, and I'm glad to hear that. Absolutely. Doctors are wrong all the time. I'm wrong sometimes too. I'm not here saying that, every case I know, or, I'm right all the time. By no means.
I saw a testimonial on your page, and it was like there was a woman, she was infertile,
Mm-hmm.
and then she became fertile like after going to you for different sessions. And I'm just like, wow. Some doctors, I don't know if you're familiar with NAET. Are you NAET?
Oh, NAT, yes.
So, like-
actually, I worked. One of my colleagues was actually one of the leaders in that research.
With Dr. Nimbujapan?
Yeah. Oh man.
So, things like that. I used to go to NAET for allergies, and a lot of my normal doctor would be like, "Why are you doing that? You're gonna cause one allergy to go away, maybe another will come, and that maybe conditions are actually worse." So for you to be in this field, like, it's like incredible, but then at the same time, it's like, how do you tell your patients, like, eventually you'll get better?
So I have to. So it's funny because a lot of times patients will approach me with from two different extremes. One, they'll come from seeing a testimonial of like, oh, he's gonna change my life, or something like that. And then two, they got recommended by somebody, but they really don't believe that it's gonna do anything, and they're just there because I'm last resort.
Last resort.
Yeah, kind of thing. They're like, man, I've tried anything, whatever. Just do your worst, right? And it's funny because I have to approach both of them very similarly, which is, just honesty. Like, hey, look, I'm gonna make a best guess as to what's going on with you, and based on that best guess, I'm going to determine how and what type of treatment you need. Let's say I give you a 10-session prescription and say, this is our treatment plan, this is my hypothesis, let's say, right? By the 10th treatment, this is what you should see, this is what I anticipate, right? Here's what happens. Sometimes someone comes in, by the second treatment, they're like, oh my God, and it happens often, but I can't go based off of that, right? Like, what if I tell somebody, hey, look, by the second treatment, you're gonna be jumping around brand new, and they're still, and it's not, and it doesn't happen, because sometimes it doesn't happen until the 10th, 20th treatment, that you're doing something. And it might be that it takes me some time to trial and error, right? Like, oh, you know what, I got that wrong, but we learned something about your case, we need to tweak this. right? And that happens often. Like I'll give someone an herbal medicine and they'll say, you know, I actually responded like this. And so that informs me a lot. It's like, oh, well, I thought it was going to go like this, but you responded like this. That means that maybe you have too much heat, let's say. So I actually we have to change that around. And so then I have to reassess the case and come to or reflect on like what went wrong, like why did it, you know, something like that. So you know, in both extremes, I have to tell them, hey, look, this is this is how I'm approaching it. This is what I think is going to happen, but who knows?
I mean, does that tie into the 8 principles that you posted with the heat?
Yes.
Can you explain that?
So that's a phenomenological approach. What that means is, okay, name a few different herbs that you've heard of that are medicinal out of the top of your head.
Besides marijuana.
Ginger, mint,
ginger, ginger.
Tangerine peel, lemon,
Thyme. Is it thyme?
cookies and cream. Okay, we could go that route too. That's cool.
Cannabis.
Cannabis. Okay. Oh, that's a great time. Actually, we're
Perp.
So what's your opinion on medicinal marijuana and how does it help?
I'm gonna tie it into the 8
Yeah,
principles. To the 8 principles. I'm gonna tie it. So, 8 principles is giving us a guide. It's a roadmap to viewing our human experience, right? And someone else's, but also the nature or the property of things, right? So we said a couple of different herbs. There's, you know, cannabis, mint, ginger, tangerine peel, and cookies and cream. We'll go into perp, right? But all of these have, like, let's say, basic experiences that they give you, right? So you take a piece of ginger, right, and you place it in your mouth and you chew on it. What's your experience? It tastes. What else? Just give me a little bit more. Be a little bit more descriptive.
Well, ginger, when I put it in my tea, it's
I always drink it. I never.
It's spicy.
It's spicy, right?
It's spicy.
Okay, spicy. We attribute spicy to hot.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Anything else?
It makes my eyes red.
It makes your eyes red. That's a phenomenological experience. You experience that it's hot, that it's spicy, and that it makes your eyes red. Mint.
I never knew it was hot.
Yeah.
Well,
So
chew on it next time, right?
I'll chew on it next time.
The same thing with mint, right? You place a mint in your mouth, what happens?
It's kind of cold.
It's cold. It's cold in
Nice,
nature.
fresh.
It's fresh. It's refreshing, right? Yeah. So all of those are, and I'm giving you the most basics because we get a little bit more in depth as we break down the properties of each of the herbs. But here we're just touching on the temperature. But they also have associated acupuncture channels. They have a whole bunch of other things, right? But so we are associating or attributing these properties to these herbs. Now, cannabis, right? Now, there's 2 elements to the cannabis. Because we could talk about the medicinal properties of the seed of the cannabis, and we could talk about the medicinal properties of the bud of the cannabis.
So I thought you were about to say, let's talk about the street version.
Oh, but that's important too.
Yeah, because the street version has a whole bunch of THC, and THC is bad for us.
I'm not. So I don't. I love all herbs, man. Opium, you know, cannabis, psilocybin, all of it. It's a matter of how we use it. Yeah, it's a matter of how we approach it.
So can you abuse it? You can abuse.
Yeah,
absolutely,
you can get addicted to it.
Well,
Opium especially.
I think that. Oh, of course. Yeah, I mean
So
that's the opiate crisis right now.
People say, "Oh, I smoke weed every day, every hour, but I'm not addicted." It's not addictive.
It doesn't matter if you're addicted or not, but you can definitely most likely see some of the consequences of chronic abuse of cannabis. Absolutely, especially if depending on the source, right? Like you're getting it from the streets, probably has a lot of fungicide, pesticides. You know, it's not raised in natural light. All of these things, the plant absorbs that phenomenology. It absorbs that experience, and as traumatized as it is, and with all those chemicals, that's what you're smoking. Right now, take a look at cannabis. Right, what's the properties of cannabis? Like, what do you say when you describe cannabis, unbiasedly? Just like what are some of the things?
That, smoking it or just
yeah. With your experience after you smoke it, or if you chewed it or whatever.
Cannabis has a scent. I think it's a
It's like a
Pretty-
skunky, like
Yeah.
a
It
strong,
Depends what it
foul
is.
smell.
Sometimes it's sweet, sometimes it's stank.
I think it pretty much has almost the same.
It's always very strong though.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
It's
Smell
always
it.
foul.
It has a
Like
huge
it leaves
odor,
yeah. And would you, like we describe it as
Sticky sometimes when you feel
sticky,
it.
yeah. And also we describe it as getting high,
Yeah.
right? When we that's another element. That's not temperature. Now we're talking about right altitude. This is yes, but also if we look at 8 principles, you can look at the 8 principles is talking about hot and cold, exterior, interior. Is it breaking those down? Is it yin yang and breaking those down and tied into the organ system? Every organ system is it chi and blood. Those are concepts that I don't want to break down, at the moment.
That's
but
what I believe in. I believe in like most things start in your mind, your head, in your body too, mental.
sure, but if a bullet passes through your arm, that's not
Yeah.
mental, right? So like we have to appreciate that and that's one of the biggest, I think, hurdles that we have in unifying the medical worldviews. I'm talking among even professionals, right? Because we're so we feel dispossessed by biological or molecular medicine, or let's say just physical medicine, and so we get the notion that like it doesn't work. That's not what it is. It has to be something else and so we throw out the baby, the bathwater, the tub. We throw out the whole house, right? And then we're like, so it has to be holistic medicine. It has to be all natural. It has to be all mental. It has to be all spiritual. And you have to, like, there's a lot of stuff that we learn from this side that you don't want to just throw away. And so,
It's all medicine at the end.
Yeah.
You're
It
saying
works
we
together.
should all be open to everything, pretty much.
No, absolutely not. We should have boundaries, right? We should have parameters, but we should have tools to assess what's coming in and not just completely just block everything out.
Yeah.
Right?
So basically, you're saying if you get shot, you're not gonna prescribe herbs. You want to.
Right. I mean,
I know some people will. Who
Yeah,
But you
for
want-
emergency cases, I've done it for myself, right? Like I got hit by a car, the bike pedal went through my leg, and I've treated it all with herbs.
So you like stop the bleeding with herbs?
Okay,
That's
well,
what I'm talking
I stopped
about
the
as far
bleeding
as-
with qigong, right? So at that point, it's gonna sound ludicrous, but this is what happened. I got hit. It was bleeding, and at that time I was heavily influenced and deep in training for Tai Chi, meditation, qigong, all of these things, and we have our minds have a strong power and influence that we can control certain aspects of our body.
So a big thing about now is the opioid epidemic, and the pharmaceutical companies are making a ton of money just giving out. Sometimes the prescriptions are not as correct, so they're just giving out pills. What do you think about the opioid epidemic and people popping pills for like recreational purposes?
Right.
People don't even notice it too. They think they're normal. They're
Yeah.
fine.
Let's see here. I want to make sure that I'm diplomatic in how I respond. This is like it's a big political, medical, and it's a big subject, and people get
Riled up.
not even that, but with NAT, let me not go there, but
I
whatever.
understand what you mean though.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna approach it very gently. But let's say this. Okay, I'll put you a scenario, right? I don't know if I can do that, but pain management clinics, all right? And this has changed over time, like with some of the legislation that's been presented, because the CDC came out and stated like pain medication, narcotics cannot be, for surgery and pharmaceuticals cannot be the first line option to treat anything, any chronic conditions at least. Acute, yes, obviously, right? But not chronic conditions, okay. So that changed the way that many pain management clinics had to function, right? Because you're talking about a pain management clinic that sees 20 patients in 2 hours, right? That a doctor's just sitting there, and there's a lot of nuances there. The doctor's got to get paid. He's not gonna pay the bills. You know what I
I
mean?
just gotta say that
And,
it's a business.
and they're only going to get paid a certain amount, so they have to see a certain amount of patients. So the patient comes in, I have pain. Okay, he has pain. Is the medication helping you? Yes, the medication is helping me. Okay, reauthorize another prescription, right?
No, me.
Yeah, I'm not,
You know what I'm saying?
No,
So
that's just what it is,
let's say that the prescription is 350, 250 milligrams, whatever it is, right? And then all of a sudden you tell this patient, well, we have legislation now that's being presented that, you know, I have to actually cut you down, or I can't give you this amount, you know. But let's say that the patient is really in pain. We're not even touching the
Taking advantage.
yeah, the addicted or the we're talking about legitimate pain and patients that this is their experience. And now the doctor has to tell them, I gotta cut you down to 150. That's a big change. That's a big change
Now
for
that
some
person's
people.
body is hooked to a certain.
Some people yes, some people no. You know, for some people it doesn't matter. You know, for some people it does. But so you have that element right now. I think it's great, but again, you're leaving a large gap if there isn't something that's presented as like, okay, look, we're taking this away, but this is what's going to help you now. And so there was a white paper. It's kind of like a statement from a field, right? That the acupuncture profession put forth, and it's actually in it's called the organization is called Acupuncture Now Foundation. Mm-hmm. They do great work. They gather all the research on opioid crisis phenomena, acupuncture and pain management, and everything that can help revolving around that. And they synthesized that information and put forth a white paper and said acupuncture has been studied and can be a major contributor in helping navigate us out of this dilemma, right? And on multiple levels. But they're only talking about just pain, but it can also be on weaving people off because of the addictive component, right? So like auricular therapy can help modulate the nervous system and therefore lessen the symptoms that come about from reducing some of these medications, right? But that's a different subject. You could look at NADA protocol for that, which is National Association or National Acupuncture Detox Association. So in the pain management, that's being presented, but that's a big hit. That's a big money hit.
Yeah.
That's it.
So basically, there's alternatives, but it would cost them financially.
Oh, certain people, yeah.
Oh.
Certain companies, the pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah. I mean, other people too, but a lot of other people. But
it's a business to me, man.
Yeah,
they gotta do what's good for their business.
Yeah.
They don't care about.
Also, but you also have to think about, so okay, as a medical practitioner, you're bound to a couple of different platforms on which you base your decision making on, right? One of them is yes, your expertise, your clinical experience, what you've gathered. Another is like research, what you've learned, the literature, the material. And this is what we call like evidence-based medicine and the three pillars. And one of the pillars is patient values, right? Some patients, they want the pills. So it's almost like to a certain degree, we have to appreciate that they prefer pharmaceutical approaches to healing. So, it's a complex, I think, problem to approach because it's like we're saying that we know better, basically, right? So look, we know better, so we're gonna take away your pharmaceuticals and give you this. That's a bold statement, regardless of what we think about, it's like, oh no, it's because the money, and so that's the only reason that it's still there or whatever it is. But also it's been entrenched. It's in our culture. It's been entrenched in the minds of patients for so long that only pharmaceuticals can help, or only certain tests can tell you what's wrong with you or whatever. So it's a big change, and it has to be approached with a sensitive mind, you know, like with a mindful mind.
You know what Truvado is?
No.
It's that I seen a commercial. It's like, I don't know if it's a pill or whatever. It's a drug though, saying that you take it now and it lowers your risk of HIV and stuff like that.
Okay.
He's like,
that's another big topic. I mean,
it's very broad.
So what do you think about Broward and Miami being one of the biggest HIV/AIDS?
Well, look, I went to
Let him
Southridge,
answer
man.
that first. Like, he's trying to
Yeah.
you always trying to make people avoid questions.
It's cool. It's, I mean, that's what you're supposed to do, man. Like, if you're running the interview, you're supposed to ask provocative questions. So I can appreciate that, and it's my responsibility to take care of where I can navigate and not. But look, when I went to, I dropped out of high school, but the years that I went, I went to Southridge. I hate to put out my school like that, but it was known to be one of the. It was like the incidence rate there was high. Like even so, like yeah, Broward and Miami is high,
But
and
there-
within there it was super high, right? But it's within a certain group of people.
Group of people. Elaborate.
A certain group of people. Elaborate. I am for sure. People that abuse sex and people that didn't.
There was a thing going on too. People having sex with like donkeys and dogs and horses and
I
stuff.
don't know about that. I think I'll avoid that one. I'm not. That'll be another podcast with somebody else.
I don't know about all
What
that.
about the drug though, the Truvado? Do you think people should be taking that, or
If I don't know, I can't advise anything on it. You know, I haven't heard of it. I haven't read
it's
it.
a commercial?
I haven't
They've
read
been trying to. I guess what's next? They're gonna say, "Oh, we got the cure for cancer now."
it. Man, that's another beast. But
I know they got it. The government hiding it. You just gotta have money.
you know, I think that I don't want to dismiss advances that we like that are provided by scientists that do a lot of experimentation. Like there's a disconnect, man. There's good science. Like there's like sciences. When I was going through school, man, I failed. I hated science. It was not my thing.
That's
And
still-
now
to this day.
I'm like all in it. Like and it's because the way it's taught and some of the I guess taboos around it. And also
What do you mean by the way it's taught?
and well, let me keep going on another subject. The way it's taught, meaning I'll just give you a brief. If you look at, for example, Waldorf oriented schools or Montessori, it's more phenomenological. Like you give the kid the ability to observe and then ask questions, as opposed to here's a textbook, memorize this, right?
So you're
That's
applying.
that's for any subject though in school. I feel like
Yeah.
Yeah.
they
But
grade you
You
on
learn
they give you a quiz and that's how you're based off of it. That's how
Right,
smart
right,
you're
right.
supposed to
Instead
be.
of applying it.
right
Yeah.
now, that's a beast too. Like if you try to, how are you going to fund that? Because Waldorf schools, they have scholarships and stuff like that. But there has to be people that are actually doing that work. And in my school, we had I think like 2,000. The population is like 2,000 students. How you gonna do that for 2,000 students with like just a few teachers, half of them coaches already, and underpaid. So it's a tough question to answer,
I believe teachers need to be paid more. I really do.
Yeah, I think we need to look into that a lot, man. I think it's more than just like teachers being paid, but absolutely for sure. If there's no incentive.
So how do
So-
people get into like getting your help for as far as like being helped for
So
medicine or sicknesses or whatever the case is?
Well, I do. So my business branches off into a few different sectors. I think for the average person, it'd be through my private practice, right? So I provide concierge services. They contact me. They contact me through Instagram, Facebook. All of my information is on the website as well. DM, whatever, email, and we make an appointment. And we get going through my method. But this is one of the branches that I'm, I think, developing more after a few years of experience is public engagement or community empowerment events, speaking.
I'm starting and stuff like that too.
Because education is every patient that comes in, this is the conversation that I have. Like, they just have a bunch of questions, and that is where they're unstable, and so it leads into poor health because they don't have fundamental platforms. They don't know certain things, right? So like, if I could provide that on a large scale, then when people come see me, I can focus on specialized things, right? Like actually customized herbs for complex cases, right? But what I'm having to do a lot of the times is educate people on basics, right? So why not instead do that through a larger platform? So that's one of the branches that I'm doing, and I think that's one. So how are people going to get help? I think support my speaking engagements. Read on some of the subjects that you hear me kind of just throw out. Inform yourself on that. But definitely, I think my style of practice is unique, and I showed that in my research, and so I'm hoping to actually make that a little bit more part of the traditional route of medicine, even for integrative medicine. Because check this out, after I presented my research, so I got they want me to develop a curriculum and publish and a couple of different things, but so I went and I discussed and I was talking. I think she was the dean or something like that, and what she told me, she's like, look, you have a job, but 5 years from now, because your research or what you're presenting, we can't present right now because the curriculum doesn't even introduce systems biology or systems pharmacology or complex adaptive systems. These are concepts that are foreign to both, to the integrated, to the holistic. These are, because this is just where the current, and it always happens like that. Like when you're reading, studying at school, the textbook that you're reading is usually 5-10 years old, so the information is outdated already. So that's where I'm trying to actually pin down now. Like I love my private practice, right? I also have other like private and public contracts, and so that kind of stabilizes me economically to just administratively run some of those aspects of my business. Also, I'm supporting my field and employing physicians or whatever. But my private practice I love because I get to practice my craft, master my craft. But in the clinic, what I find, or at in patients' workspaces or home, whatever, after these years, what I found is that I need to teach them 8 principles. I need to teach them that how to experience things and make note of it. Why do we say that we get high, or when we smoke cannabis?
I get high.
Yeah, because of the song.
I get high.
It has a yang property, and it's spicy. What's something that we how do we, at least in Spanish, right? We say something about people when they've smoked it so long. Do you guys say something? Do you have
they say paje.
Paje. Okay. Well, in Spanish we say está quemado.
Está quemado.
Quemado, right? Which means that you're burnt out.
Oh, I heard people say that a lot in my job a couple times.
So what you're insinuating is that you're dried out.
Oh, that's what it means.
Right? So like you're taking a plant that's very hot in nature, kind of like ginger, right? It's very spicy, and you're consuming it on a regular basis. Not only is it spicy and hot, but also you're consuming it in a hot form. You're burning it, and then you're inhaling the smoke, right? So you're drying out the lungs on top of that, just by nature of smoke, not even by nature of the herbal property, but just by nature of it. So you have like a compound effect, right? And so if you look at the text where I derive the diagnostic system that I use, what we're actually trying to do is cultivate yin, because yin is our essence. Yin is what's going to give you longevity. Yin is your tree of life. You have a certain amount of yin. This is your yin. And throughout life, you're using your yin. Every time you have sex and ejaculate, you can have sex and not ejaculate and probably preserve some of that yin, right? You could, every time you don't sleep and your body has to produce more blood, it takes from the yin and it transforms it into blood because it recognizes that it needs it.
So you run out at some point.
You run out at some point. And if you're just smoking away, right, you're gonna get thin. You're gonna use up all your yin. You're gonna
cannabis or cigarettes?
Cannabis. I mean, cigarettes. You have a different element, but you're still drying out your lungs. You can hear the dry cough. You know,
so you think smoking is detrimental? Smoking weed? To a degree?
To a degree, I think there's. I think that there's ways that it can be used constructively. But I think that that's not exactly how we do it.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Quick questions. I got a couple more questions.
Yeah. I'm happy, man. All the time y'all got, I got it.
We got a 3, so we got to wrap it up.
Yeah, I know. He's on his way. He's here looking for play. But they said, I was looking online and just recently they were saying how too much sleep is bad for us too, and too little sleep is bad for us too.
Yeah.
So how much hours of sleep are we supposed to be sleeping on the regular so that's perfect?
If we look at it from so first there's a couple of like idioms or like statements of fact, kind of like things that your grandma told you. Yin Yang theory based medicine, Taoist based medicine, or TCM, which is traditional Chinese medicine, has that embedded in their culture and in their medicine. And they have certain things. For example, don't walk barefoot. If you stand too long, I think it's like you hurt your bones. If you sit too long, you hurt your lungs. If you walk too much, you hurt your tendons. If you sleep too much, you hurt your heart or your lung, or one of the two, right? They're just there as statements of fact. They don't explain it, none of it. They're just there, right? But they have a lot of truth to it. When you start trying to explain like why someone would say that, there's a lot of truth to it. I wouldn't give you a number and say like you have to sleep 10, 12 hours. Now there's some research that does give you numbers, and it gives you some damn good numbers, right? Based on age. So like when you're this old, this is how much you should sleep and da 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 da. But I have a little bit more complex perspective on sleep. Why do we sleep? To rest, right? To restore, to regenerate, okay. But if we get to the point that we are exhausted, that you just get home and you just collapse, it doesn't matter if you slept all 8-10 hours, you still used up more of your yin, right?
So sleep more.
That sleep is not, but the sleep is not gonna give you back yin, right? Like there's no catching up on sleep.
Yeah, there's no such thing.
There's no such thing, right? So like just sit. Oh, what's up, my brother? So just catching up on it is not going to restore the lack of sleep that you had. So I don't want to give you a number, but what I will say is rest. Rest meaning even throughout the day, sit, breathe, and meditate. Close your eyes and appreciate that your body has a limited amount of resources, unless you're continuously cultivating and gathering and harnessing, the other resources that are available to us.
All right. Next question is too much sex bad? Because people, I don't know if you heard.
I think too much ejaculation is bad. I think there's no such thing as too much sex.
Okay, so too much.
Hey, man. But here's the thing.
Did you say you lose cells? I mean,
you lose. Yeah, we call it essence. So you have pre-having essence, right? You stem cell, bone marrow, whatever you want to call it. Even in the cerebrum, if you look at the anatomical, we call it the arbor vitae. It's an anatomical location. Wikipedia is amazing. It's in the cerebellum or the cerebrum. Yeah, I think it's the cerebellum. So when it's cross-sectional, when you cut it cross-sectional on dissection, you see that it looks like a tree, and so they call it the arbor vitae, right? Okay, that's white matter. That's the brain, and so again, we're looking at a limited amount of resources, basically the esoteric or the occult approach to that is, or perspective on it, is that you're picking from the tree of life every time you ejaculate, every time you don't sleep enough, and then your organ has to produce its own this and that.
I gotta slow down,
right? Yeah. So and it's not sex, because sex can actually energize you. It can actually cultivate a greater sense of awareness, greater optimization of your spirituality. But it's sexual. Just look into Kama Sutra. Look into microcosmic and macrocosmic orbits of Qigong. Look into different Tai Chi practices and on how to cultivate that and how to stop ejaculation. Also, man, lovemaking with your partner is going to be on another level. Like, if you're not ejaculate, the woman will be like, oh my God, why aren't you? Like, they're
gonna think something wrong with you.
No,
you don't like them.
No, they get frustrated because it's exciting. And it's almost like a dominance. Like, I made you come, right? But if you have control over yourself, if you have dominance in that situation over yourself, you're showing that's self-actuation. Like that's self-actualization. That you're showing such discipline and control over yourself that it's actually attractive to the female.
Is that mentally?
That's a whole. That's a whole.
Another topic. I'm gonna have to bring you back for that. All right, this is my last question before we wrap it up. What do you consider talking? Is it dating or sex? Like talking to somebody like you just met, y'all just for 2 weeks.
I'm married, man. I've been married for 3 years.
Hypothetically.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean I know hypothetically, but I'm telling you that because I've learned a couple things about my cultural heritage, right? Upon being married, even certain thoughts, even looking or whatever a certain way.
It's a sin.
I don't want to call it a sin, but I will say that when you reflect on yourself honestly afterward, it makes you feel bad. So you have to. It's just being mindful. It don't matter what you call it, talking or saying, because at the end of the day, if you're saying I'm just talking because I'm not having sex, but you're being so promiscuous in your talking and your flirtation and your guiding and your leading, you're being deceptive. I mean, what's the difference?
Yeah, it's almost the same thing.
Yeah.
The title type of thing is probably.
Yeah, the label is just it's just semantics.
So
it's
like
just
when you
words.
have a connection with somebody, you just have a connection, whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, you have to acknowledge we're on another level of consciousness as a collective, and if you stay backed up, people are gonna look you in the eye and realize that you're not authentic, you're not being genuine, and you're gonna call you on it.
Yeah, I caught my brother on it. He fucking this girl.
Oh man, no, that was the next one. Huh? I don't want drama in my life.
And where can everybody find you?
My Instagram is at integrative_medicine. They could go. That my website is the URL is on the profile. They could go to facebook.com/IamAcuHerbal. They could email me. My email is info@IamAcuHerbalmed.com. And the link to verify your insurance and all of that is there. So.
Okay, we appreciate you having
Thank you for
on.
coming
you.
out.